Yo Rana, and welcome to FM Tahiti, or in this case it's FM Tahiti does stats, or stats for FM, whatever we want to call it for this. I'm just building on the last kind of introductory video where I tried to see what kind of interest there was in a series like this. It turns out a few people are interested in how to use more kind of inferential, more kind of higher level statistics and tests on the data you can get from Football Manager. So from the attributes for the players and from the in-game statistics that you can extract from the actual game itself. So in the introductory session I showed you an example of how you can use things like multilinear regressions, which are just ways of seeing if groups of variables can predict one particular variable. So can you predict average ratings using a set of variables, just to show you how maybe certain attributes might predict performance for our particular setup, just to kind of whet your appetite with it. So for this one we're going back a step really, and we're looking at correlations, which I'll explain in a second, of basically just a simple way of looking at a relationship between two variables to see if two variables interact significantly in some way. So I'm going to cover what is correlation in this episode. What I'm also going to do is cover some of the caveats and assumptions about my approach as well, and I won't do that for every one of these episodes. I just mainly do it for this one probably and refer back to it. I'm also going to go through a few kind of worked examples, potentially on goals, and seeing if the goals are related to average ratings, to see what kind of impact that has on people's average ratings, just to demonstrate how influential they are and how much they skew average ratings. Might look at concentration as an attribute and how many mistakes are made. We might also look at age and the impact it has on average rating, or just looking at the age and how it has an impact on average rating when you just look at the older players potentially. So we might look at a few different examples. There's a few we could look at. Before we begin that bit, I'll just mention those caveats and assumptions. So all the stats that I'm using in this episode, and I'm using with this kind of technique, work on a few assumptions. So one of the assumptions is that the player data you're using is your own. So from your own squad, in your own games, using your tactics and using your setup. And if you do that, and you've kept your tactics and your setup and your team essentially relatively stable, then you've essentially controlled for a lot of potential confounding variables as much as you can. So it's something that I think came up a little bit in Cleon's Paysandu sort of no attributes thread on Sports Interactive site. It's on other sites as well. But I think somebody asked if Cleon was going to use the player stats, the percentage, header won, that kind of stuff, to determine whether a player was going to be any good. And I think it was either Cleon or someone else mentioned that that's not really a good measure. So yeah, headers won per 90 might tell you how many headers a player has won per 90. It's very kind of Ron Seal in that sense. But you don't know what tactic they're playing. I've got a lot of players that might win a lot of headers per 90 because I'm playing a tactic that has more aerial balls. So more of my players are going to have to receive the ball in the air and head it. So I don't know whether someone else's headers per 90 is also being affected by that, or whether it's kind of reduced and so on. Likewise, you might be playing again, or you might be looking at players from a team that play a very limited defensive game, and the strikers might not have many shots per 90 because they don't get many opportunities, and that might not be a very good measure of how many chances they're creating and so on. So there are lots of those statistics that you might be able to see in other teams for other players, but actually they're not that useful for you. There's so many different variables that could potentially involve that affecting them that you have no control over, that it's a very tricky way of trying to use data. So you can't really use data from other teams. But if you use your own, so if you use your own players who are playing in the tactic you want your new players to come in and play, then you can start looking at predictions, start looking at differences, because you've controlled for things like the formation. You're using either the same or a very similar formation with similar instructions and similar roles. If you make a massive tactical change, then you're probably going to have to treat that as a separate data set. You control essentially for the level you're playing at as well. So as you go up through the leagues, you can make a note of what season your stats came from, so you can account for that. So you know whether actually the tactic was overpowered in the lower leagues for whatever reason, and the people had a kind of boost, the skewing in their match stats as a result of that. So you can take that into account if you're using your own data. So for everything I've used here, I've got 3 or 4 seasons worth of data from my senior team using the different match views that I've just taken it from. I'm not using anyone else's because I want to know what has an impact on the tactic I'm playing. And that's the key thing. I want to know what it is that works for me. So I've got 4 seasons from the senior team, so all the players in the senior squad at the end of May. That's 4 seasons using 4-4-2, bar 1 or 2 games where I went a bit nuts and changed it. 4 seasons of pretty much the same player roles as well, so it's always been a pressing forward target man combination up top, for example. And I've got 1 season in the second tier of my Rura 2 game, and 3 seasons in the top tier, and 4 professional seasons overall, so all on the full-time or professional training schedule. So I've got all of that kind of set as much as I can, so I can now work out what attributes are important for predicting performance for my team, what attributes and statistics predict how well they're going to play, how effective my tactic is. And that's how I'm going to use it, because then once I know which ones are more important, I can use that to make decisions about who's going to play, and I can make decisions about who I'm going to buy and who I'm going to sell. If I know, for example, that aggression is really important, then that's something I'm going to look at more than other statistics and attributes. Likewise, if it turns out that actually what's more important for my defenders is positioning and concentration rather than the actual traditional technical defending attributes, then that's what I'm going to prioritize when selecting the teams and buying players. So I won't mention this every episode, it's mainly just for this. Another thing to bear in mind is that you can use statistics to describe. You can try to use them to predict, which is what I'm trying to use them for. Because in the game, the statistics you get are only describing what's going on. I'm trying to extend that and use them to predict. And I can use them to make kind of logical inferences about what my team needs and what I should change. But I can't expect them to be 100% accurate. I can't extend it to beyond the population that my sample kind of represents. As I said before, a new system, new tactic, that I need to result in new data. And that would apply to you if you want to do something similar as well. The way statistics works is it's trying to show you where significant differences or relationships are. And by significant, we mean statistically significant. So this is where you've got a 95% chance or better of this representing a real reliable difference or real reliable relationship. You're saying there's a 5% chance or less that this essentially is a freak result, that this is due to some randomness in your data. The way it does this is complicated-ish, but we're not going to go into the underlying statistical issues to do with p-values and things like that. We're going to stay away from that, but look at the actual application of it. So, for us, correlations. Within statistics, we can do a few things, and broadly speaking, what we can do is we can describe the data, so we can use things like means, median, modes, so the averages. We can look at percentages, we can look at the data range, like age ranges, we can look at distributions. That's the descriptive side of this, and the descriptive side is what's kind of naturally in Football Manager anyway, so when you find the stats for the players about percentage headers won, number of key tackles, average rating, that's all descriptive statistics. And when it does it on the team level as well, that's also descriptive statistics. So the average possession for your team is one of those descriptors. We can also test for relationships between variables, and we can test for differences in scores between groups or between other variables. So we're looking at correlation, which can be represented by, in some cases, that formula down there. And what a correlation is looking at is whether as one relationship, as one value changes for a variable, does the value for another variable change, and in what direction? So is there a relationship between them? It doesn't tell you whether one's causing the other or not. That's a slightly different issue. Within these kind of tests of relationship, we can look at what we call correlations, so what are known as bivariate correlations, because it's just between two variables. Variable A, variable B is a relationship. You can have things that are called simple regressions, where you're saying not just is there a relationship between the two, but you're using the formula and the statistics underneath it to work out how much it predicts a change. So how much of the variance in the score it predicts, how much of a change it predicts, which you can then use using the formula to actually give you a value. So it's something I touched on a little bit in the introduction with the multilinear regression, I think, because the multilinear regression does the same thing but with multiple variables rather than just two. And in those regressions and multilinear regressions, you can find out, does an increase of an attribute by 1 change the average rating by X, Y, Z. So you can find out what a change in aggression by 1 is likely to have an impact on. You can use it in a very direct, predictable way. Correlations, though, don't look at that kind of host of different relationships. It's just looking at one potential relationship, and that is there a relationship in this example here on the right between concentration and the amount of mistakes leading to goals that a player makes. So as concentration increases, do we see more or less mistakes leading to a goal? So it's something we can look at like that. And some of these relationships might be really obvious because they're the way the game's meant to work. So as someone's concentration increases, you should expect to see fewer mistakes leading to a goal, for example. But it's always something worth testing. It's always something worth seeing if there's any relationship within your tactic. So you might set up in a way that means actually concentration is less important than other factors. And you can work out what the most important factors are. Now with a correlation, and this is a recap, so some of you may already know this, but you have two potential relationships. So you've got a positive relationship or a positive correlation where as one score increases, so does the other. This is what we've got in the bottom left here. Or you can have a negative correlation where as one score increases, the other decreases. So a negative correlation there. So you have two different patterns of data, two potential relationships you can find using a normal bivariate correlation. So for example, a positive correlation could be as the temperature increases, the number of ice creams sold increase. It's a standard relationship. So as it gets hotter, people buy more ice cream. It's a positive relationship. Another potentially positive relationship is that the number of ice creams sold also positive correlates with the number of shark attacks. So the more ice creams are sold, the more shark attacks are also reported. This kind of reveals a bit of a flaw. So not all of these relationships we'll find are actually directly causal. So in this situation, it's not that people are getting attacked by sharks because the ice cream's making them tastier to sharks or anything ridiculous like that. It's because more people are eating ice cream because it's hot. And when it's hot, more people are swimming in the sea, so there's more opportunity for shark attacks. So shark attacks go up in this kind of theoretical situation. So there's another variable hidden away that's having a direct impact on both of these events. But because we're only looking at these two together, it almost looks like they're related. So there's lots of other kind of correlations you can look at, like as the number of pirates in the world has gone down, the average temperature has gone up. So you could use that to try and say that global warming is caused by the death of pirates, something like that. Because it's something you have to be aware of. It doesn't actually establish causation. We don't know which direction these relationships are working in, if one's causing the other, or if there's another variable involved. So it's something we have to bear in mind. But what we can do is see if there's a relationship between things like our concentration attributes and mistakes leading to a goal made in a match. Apologies, Liverpool fans. We could look at whether the number of corners in a game is related to the amount of points per game, or the corner taking attribute and the number of points per game that are actually established. That would help you work out whether you actually need to really be ramping up the number of corners you're trying. So you're going to play for set pieces, for example, to try and eke out a few extra points. We could also look at it in terms of what impact does the amount of goals scored have on average ratings. So we can establish just how skewed or average ratings are, or whether they're not skewed. And generally what I imagine we'd find in this instance is that goals have a bigger impact on the average rating than other key statistics might have for other positions, which to me would potentially suggest that average ratings are not what we need to look at when we're trying to establish what works for our team. Instead, we want to look at the functions So interceptions, key tackles, shots on target, chances created, those will be better measures potentially than average rating if average rating is skewed unfairly by particular variables. So these are all things we can look at. So some of the ones we might look here are decision attributes, mistakes made, goals and the average stat, corners word, the average points games, all ones I mentioned just there. Or simple correlations. Some might just confirm relationships that we think should already exist, so the decision attribute of mistakes made, for example, or concentration of mistakes made. Or they could reveal information that just helps us tweak our player choices or tactical choices for our team. It could be by doing it we manage to squeeze out an extra point here or there. By squeezing out an extra point here or there, it means we can maybe win a title, win a cup, not be relegated, achieve above and beyond. So correlations are simple, and they've got some flaws in that it's very difficult to establish, the direction of the relationship or if there's another variable involved. But they're a good starting point, a very quick starting point. So we're going to look at that using SPSS next. So here we are with SPSS. You can use freeware versions. There's PSSS, I think is called, that you can use its freeware version. And it's just Excel on steroids. It looks worse than it is. So here we've got personality, average rating, teamwork, work rate, determination, concentration, aggression, appearances, assists, goals, games won percentage in terms of how many games they won that appeared in. And this is just done decimally because you can't put percentage sign in, so 0.67 just means 67%. The amount of points they won per game on average, the amount of mistakes leading to a goal, the amount of mistakes they made, and their age. And this is just from the general Tahiti sheet. So what we can do is analyse a few things nice and quickly. So if you go to correlate, then bivariate through the analyse menu, what we can do, because I've been playing around with this already, is move across what we're interested in. So let's just put average rating in there and goals to begin with. So if we put those in there, what we find here is we get two boxes: descriptive statistics and correlations. Descriptive statistics, it's just telling us the mean average rating is 6.9 and the average amount of goals per player is 3.1. And that 99 of our data points, or 99 of our players, have contributed to this. So this is slightly less than the 102 I think we've got in the data set. That's because anyone who's not got any appearances and therefore has nothing, like a complete blank in those boxes for average rating and goals, just isn't included. Underneath we've got our correlation box, and actually it's only this little bit here, this sort of right hand quadrant, that we're interested in. Everything else is a repetition or a comparison against itself. So here we've got average rating compared to average rating. It's just the way it presents it. So it puts together all the different combinations you could look at for this correlation. And when you've only got two, it just gives you this kind of like 2x2 comparison where there's lots of repetition. So we don't care about average rating being compared to average rating. What we care about is the next column where we've got average rating compared to goals. And this very first cell here, we've got the value of 0.545. And that's our correlation coefficient, or our Pearson's R value, which is just the correlation value. And what this value does is it tells us whether we've got a positive or negative relationship and how strong that relationship might be. So for a correlation, correlations are scored on a scale of -1 to +1. The closer they are to 1, whether that's minus or positive, the stronger that relationship, the more clear that relationship is. The closer it is to 0, the more likely it is that there is no relationship, the more likely it's just a random comparison. The negative and the positive just tells you the direction of that relationship. So if it's in the positives, then it's a positive relationship, whereas one value goes up, the other goes up. If it's negative, it's the reverse, where one value goes up, the other value goes down. So in this case, this 0.545 suggests we've got a reasonably strong positive relationship going on. As one value goes up, so as goals go up, average rating goes up. When we want to work out whether this is a real relationship, what we have to consider is the statistical significance. So I mentioned earlier on in the other video, we've got that 95% kind of confidence or above that we want to be aiming for. The idea that we want to be 95% or more sure that this relationship that we found in our data accurately represents reality, that it's a real difference and not some kind of statistical freak that we have found just through random chance. And that if we were to repeat our data collection 100 times, then at least 95 of those times we would get a similar positive relationship. So this is what we call our significance value, or our p-value. This is what we compare to our threshold to let us know whether this is significant or not. So anything below 0.05 we consider to be significant. Anything above 0.05, 0.05 or above is not significant. So in this case, we've got a value of 0.000. SPSS is just telling us it's less than 0.0001. So that 0.001 is less than 0.05, so what we've got is a statistically significant positive relationship or positive correlation. We can be very confident that what we found, this relationship, is real. As more goals are scored, someone's average rating is going to go up. And we can even express that with a graph, although it'll look slightly skewed because of the way the data's come out. If we put goals in here, you get a scatter plot. We put a line of best fit in there, and you can see this is a bit like that positive line we had, that trending line, that positive line of best fit. As one goes up, so does the other. It's clustered around here because most of the team haven't scored many goals, because a lot of the team of defenders or midfielders haven't scored, but there's still a relationship there. So we've already checked there that there seems to be quite a strong relationship between goals scored and average rating. If we want to analyse and see what else might be related, we might go to bivariate, get rid of goals, let's put in mistakes leading to a goal. And when we look at this, we look down here, we find we've got a correlation coefficient of 0.06, and the significance value is 0.515. So that 0.06 is very close to 0, so it's suggesting there probably isn't a relationship. And that 0.515 is confirming it essentially for us, because 0.515 is bigger than, greater than 0.05. So there's no significant difference. So making mistakes leading to a goal, and making lots of them, doesn't seem to have an impact on the average rating in any kind of direction, really. So we could look at a few other things from a general kind of stats. So we could look, for example, if you go to bivariate again, let's get rid of average rating, let's try something else. Let's look at determination, because that's always a key attribute people look at. Compare it to percentage of games won. So determination, I think, and I could be very wrong here, should indicate, the extent to which someone's determined to fight and overturn the results. If you go a goal down, you've got a highly determined team, what you should see is that you've got a better chance of overcoming that deficit and fighting back than if you've got a team that's not particularly determined, in theory. I could be very wrong. Please somebody let me know if I am. Let's just check that and see if that works for our kind of team. So we've done the correlation. So down here, our average determination stat in our team is 9.6. In terms of the percentage, the average game won percentage for our team is 0.65, so 65%. And when we look at this, we've got a correlation coefficient of 0.319, and we've got a significance value of 0.006. 0.006 is less than 0.05, so you've got a significant positive relationship. The higher your determination, the more likely they are to have a higher win percentage. So determination just seems to have an effect on the amount of games won. It's a very simple kind of relationship. But let's look at something that was maybe a little bit less obvious. Again, I've been playing around with this, so I know what this is. This isn't a surprise to me, this particular one. Let's put in aggression. And let's put in assists. Let's put in goals. So I want my team to, try and get my team to play in a very kind of aggressive, crazy gang way. I want them to be picking up the ball, getting it forward, going in for 50-50s, chancing it, all kinds of stuff. So I want to know what role aggression might have in these other factors. I don't care as much about average rating directly. I want to see, does it affect whether they're getting assists? Are they picking up the ball and taking off people in dangerous positions and assisting, or putting their body on the line to get the ball in? Likewise with goals, is it causing them to chase stuff down, aggressively tackle people in the sort of dangerous areas of the pitch, and then scoring, or likewise going in for 50-50 headers, that kind of stuff, or just generally knocking the other team around. So we're looking at this. We've got 3 in here, and although we've got 3 variables, it's only ever comparing 2 at a time using this kind of table system. So you've got a 3 by 3 table, 3 rows, 3 columns. We just read across. In the descriptive stats, our aggression stats 10.1 on average. The amount of assists is 2.1, and the amount of goals is 3.1, which is the same as earlier on because it's the same data set. If we look at the correlations, if we compare aggression here to this column of assists, we've got a positive correlation of 0.285, and it's significant because 0.004 is less than 0.05. And if we look at aggression compared to goals, we've got again a positive relationship. It's not massively strong, but it's positive. And this is significant as well. So 0.045 is less than 0.05. Just, not by much. But we've got 2 positive correlations here. So aggression seems to have an impact, potentially, on the amount of assists and the amount of goals. So it's showing us that actually as an attribute, aggression is quite important in an attacking sense for us. So it's something for me to consider when making a selection of my attacking players. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm just going to put up a different data file, and we'll have a look at that. Let's have a look at a few different aspects using my defensive or attacking view, just to show you a few extra things. So I've brought up the defensive sheet. So this is all the defensive data from my FM Tahiti defense view. It's got positioning, jumping, strength, concentration, pace, heading, marking, tackling, long throwing, because I love a good long thrower, tackle percentage, key tackles, intercepts per 90, headers per 90, mistakes leading to goals, and average rating. So a few slightly different from the general view. And one of the first things we can check using the correlation again is what has an impact on average rating. So average rating in there, we already know from the other one that mistakes leading to goals to have an effect. Let's see what these key defensive statistics do. So tackle rate, key tackles, intercepts, headers. These are all important defensive duties, arguably just as important as scoring goals, maybe more so in some situations. If you're intercepting the ball, if you're making a good header, making a key tackle, there's a good chance that you're stopping scoring opportunity for the opposition. So if the average rating kind of approach is balanced, you might expect this to also have a positive relationship with the average rating. Or you might expect all of them to have this kind of relationship. So we'll run this. And I've not got the descriptors up anymore because I'm not too bothered about them. But average rating, if we look across, all the ones with these double asterisks are significant. Single asterisks are also significant as well. And the only one that it's got a significant correlation with is headers won per 90. So the more headers won per 90, the better average rating. And that could also partly be because this is for every member of the team. So some of those headers won per 90 are also goals, headed goals. So things like intercepts, key tackles, and tackle rates are not significantly related to the average rating, even though they're really key defensive duties. So what this is telling me, and you may disagree, is that average ratings are a terrible way of determining whether someone's good. You could have a defender with a terrible overall average rating, or average or below, and you might be tempted to say, well, because they're not getting a 7.2, you're not going to include them. But actually, when you look at their statistics, they could be getting lots of key tackles, intercepts, and things like that. And that's just not being reflected in their average rating. So for me, if you ever just have a view that just has average rating, you're losing a lot of the data that the game's providing you underneath that. I know because I'm playing very kind of lower league football that intercepts and headers are key, because that's you cutting out long balls. tackle rate and key tackles are also important because that's you stopping them. So the fact they don't contribute in any way to the average rating and it's just headers is real kind of nonsense for me based on the game. And again, this is just from I can only really apply this to my sample, but I imagine you might find something similar. Goals we've already established are positively correlated and quite strong, but these key defensive statistics just aren't. So I'm going to ignore average rating. What I'm going to do is have a look at some other relationships that might be going on. So I'm going to go back to bivariate, let's get rid of average rating, and let's have a look at the impact of positioning on intercepts and headers. Because this should throw up a fairly reasonable relationship. So when we run this, we found two significant relationships. I should just go down here because it's positioning we want to look at first. So positioning has a positive correlation with intercepts. So the higher the positioning attribute, the more intercepts being made per 90. Likewise, the better the positioning, the more headers they're making per 90. And they're both positive, significant relationships. They're both below 0.05. So that's telling us positioning's pretty important when it comes to winning these headers and winning these intercepts. What about heading itself then? It would make sense that heading also has a relationship with headers 1. So we put that in, run it again. We go down here, heading actually doesn't have a positive correlation, it doesn't have any correlation with intercepts per 90, but it does with headers per 90, so 0.435. It's a reasonably strong positive correlation. But it's not much better than positioning. So positioning's 0.39, heading's 0.43. It's very close in terms of strength, the relationship. What else could we think that might be related to this? Let's go here, get rid of heading. What about jumping? What effect could jumping have? When we run this, jumping has a really positive and significant association with intercepts. So I'm assuming some of these intercepts are fairly aerial. And in terms of heading, it's got a much stronger relationship than heading actually has. So heading up here is 0.43, jumping is 0.69, which means, in theory, favouring heading, if I've got a choice between someone who's a good header and someone who's a good jumper, isn't necessarily the best thing to do. Actually, the jumping attribute might be has a stronger relationship, might have a stronger effect when it comes to headers per 90 and intercepts per 90 than heading does. So heading's contributing quite strongly to headers 1 per 90, but it's not to intercepts, whereas jumping is having a positive impact on both. So if I've got someone who's a good jumper and someone's a good header, then the jumper would appear in this to have a slight edge on the other kind of factors. And again, I'm going to stop here because I don't want this episode to go on and on and on. There's lots of different correlations I could run. But the key thing, if you're going to do something like this, is, once you've got your own data set, is work out what statistics in the game are important to you. Don't just rely on average rating, but look at the kind of proxies of your performance. If you want to know how well you're doing defensively, look at the defensive statistics and not the average rating, because the average rating is going to get skewed by goals scored more, or disproportionately more, than it is going to be skewed by the more defensive roles. And likewise for midfield duties and heading duties, what you need to do is find those statistics in the game that show you what your tactic is doing. I'm playing a long ball tactic. There are certain things that I need to pay attention to over others. So for example, the number of passes made, or the number of passes completed as a percentage, doesn't matter that much for me if I was looking at the midfield data. There are other statistics I want to look at. If you're playing a crossing game, then you want the crosses completed rather than the short passes and things like that. So you've got to find what works for your tactic and then have a look at this. So already from playing around with this, I know that determination's important. I know that aggression's important in an attacking sense for assists and goals. I also know that stuff like positioning, jumping and heading are all key attributes for me defensively. So I'll probably end it here because I was going to start rambling on for a lot longer. It's already quite a long video. Next video, I'm probably going to try and look at either things like t-tests and ANOVA for looking at differences between groups, and I might use personality types or age groups as a factor to look at for that. I'll also do another one looking at multiple regressions, so looking at patterns of attributes and how they affect our key stats. Hopefully this is some use to you. If you like it, let me know if there's something else you'd like to see instead, or something you want me to look at in a bit more depth. Let me know as well. If you're interested in just descriptive stats, and you want to look at things like, how to track improvements in attributes through training and stuff like that, people like FM Athlete and FM Jellicoe have got spreadsheets and things, and a lot of posts on that you might find quite helpful if you're more interested in the descriptive rather than the inferential side of things. But I hope you enjoyed, I hope it was useful, and what I'm going to try to do at the end of all of these videos is show you how I'm going to use it to shape my team in my FM Tahiti save. Thanks very much.